Or I think we could begin if you're ready.
And welcome to the Touchline. I'm Btn alongside my friend ROXY here, where we'll talk about the Premier League and the past week of what we've seen across the grounds in England, and looking forward to Leicester City playing Tottenham in their Premier League return. ROXY, how are you?
Good. How are you, man?
Doing all right. Now, let's get straight into it. On Friday, the Premier League opener saw many things go right and wrong for both teams. Manchester United beating Fulham at Old Trafford 1-0.
Yeah, it was a good game. Fulham held on definitely, and but Man United just got that lucky goal at the end. But Fulham definitely have a lot of potential to be a good team this season, finish above the mid-table, and yeah, I see potential in them. Man United, I don't see them having a great season either. Finishing just above top 10, I'd say ninth or eighth again. Depends on how the season goes and what signings they make, if they make any.
It's funny you mentioned signings, as Manchester United's new signing, Joshua Zirkzee, scored the winner in the 87th, with Alejandro Garnacho providing the assist to win the game for Manchester United. But some might say that Fulham had their chances early on and later on, but they just couldn't be clinical once they got into the Manchester United half. What do you?
Yeah.
I think Fulham has quite a bit of quality in their squad. They've had several departures, notably Willian leaving their squad, announcing that he'd move elsewhere or just call it a day altogether. But Manchester United did
Yes.
control possession in the match, but Fulham a bit unlucky there not to make more of their chances.
Yes, definitely. I really like Fulham's roster. They're the signings they made this season. The main one being Smith Rowe from my team Arsenal. I feel like he'll be a big factor for them. He'll end up being a player they have to build around to if they want to stay in the Premier League for a few more seasons, and he could definitely have potential to be one of the best on their team.
Surely, as Friday's match led into the return of Ipswich Town to the Premier League on Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon in England, as a 22 long hiatus from the Premier League saw Ipswich play Liverpool in the home opener for Ipswich Town. In a match that saw familiar faces for Liverpool, Mohamed Salah and Diogo Jota scoring both of Liverpool's goals, both in the second half. But some might say that Ipswich played well, almost matching Liverpool's talent that they had early in the first and early in the second half. What do you think about Ipswich Town going into this season? As obviously they say that they're relegation favorites, along with Southampton and Bournemouth. Believe it or not.
Yep. Um, Ipswich, I don't really know many players on their team, but from their match against Liverpool, that first half was very good. They were sticking along with them. Led them to a 0-0 game at the end of the first half. They definitely have potential to be something, but I don't see how they could stay up in the Premier League after this season.
Right, as we all know, usually the top three teams that are promoted from the championship are usually favorites to go back down, but we've seen exception in recent memory, as the past few seasons we've seen clubs like Fulham, Bournemouth, Brentford come up and have longer spells in the Premier League as their companions that get sent back down to the championship. Speaking of the
Yeah,
championship,
no. Yeah.
they signed a new deal with CBS, so now most matches are available to watch on American television, which is groundbreaking new deal for them. As we're moving on to the rest of Saturday's matches, Arsenal played Wolves at the Emirates. 2-0 win for Arsenal. Havertz from Saka and Saka from Havertz were the headlines that headlined that game. What do you think about Arsenal going into the season and how they played against Wolverhampton?
Yeah, that game against Wolves, it looked very promising for Arsenal. They definitely looked like they could be title contenders for this season. They looked very strong, even though it is against a weaker team who sold their best player, Patrick Neto. They could still definitely they're definitely the favorites for the Premier League this season. And this game proved it. They looked very strong. They had a majority of the possession for the game. More shots on target. They looked very good this game, and I think they can continue that for the rest of the season.
Now, we can't show you any clips or anything like that because of obviously copyright. We don't want this channel to get taken down right as it's starting to get off, but Everton played Brighton at Goodison Park. Brighton took off with it 3-0, but that's not the headline. VAR with implementing their new rules and what constitutes a penalty and what doesn't take a penalty. Brighton were up 1-0 when Simon Hooper originally awarded Everton a penalty at the 49th minute, but VAR had decided that it wasn't enough there to give a penalty, so he took it away. What do you think about VAR and its effect on Premier League matches?
Uh, I might be like the only person who thinks this, but I like VAR. Without it, I'd see many more missed calls happening than what it is now with VAR. Um, I don't think it really would have made much of a difference if they called it the other way in this match, since it was a demolition. And plus Everton had a red card that match, which
Correct. Ashley Young was sent off at the 66th
yes,
minute when it was already 2-0 to Brighton.
yeah.
Matoma, Welbeck, and Adingra scored in that match at Goodison for Brighton as they look to continue their spell in the Premier League and hopefully qualify for Europe once again. Get back to the European scenes for the second time in their history.
Yes.
From Everton, we go to up north to Newcastle, where newly promoted Southampton played Newcastle at St. James's Park. Not much to do about that game, but Newcastle were down to 10 men as Fabian Sherry was sent off with a red card, but Newcastle man Joe Linton scored at the 45th and had hung on for the 1-0 win. But Southampton looked very uninspired as they're also relegation favorites. What do you think about Southampton, and do they have any chance to stay up?
This match against Newcastle, although they didn't win, if you look at the possession stats, they had 78% of the possession this game. They controlled this game, but sadly they just couldn't find that goal. But Southampton, they got rid of most of their stars. They went on to bigger teams, obviously. I don't see one star who can help them stay up. Maybe Armstrong can help them because he's been decent in the championship, but I don't see a way Southampton could stay up. So yeah, I don't see them really doing much this season. Maybe finishing last again like they did in what was it, 2023? Yeah, 2023. I see they might finish last. I don't think they're going to be better than many teams this season, but you never know what could happen.
Right, as we've seen before, sometimes teams can pull off great escapes in the Premier League, but not so often. As we see two teams that are both promoted at the same time and have stayed up ever since the City Ground, where Nottingham Forest and Bournemouth played a 1-1 draw. Chris Wood opening the scoring for Nottingham Forest, but then Antoine Semenyo, had equalized at the 86th minute for Bournemouth. What do you think about either of those teams going into this season?
They're definitely both they're both predicted obviously by most people to be low teams in the Premier League to finish at a low spot. But I do like Nottingham Forest this season. Something about their roster just really stands out. Gibbs White, Alanga, um that their striker, the Wood guy, the guy who scored for them in that match against Bournemouth. I do like their roster. Sells is a very good goalie. Um, I think they could finish higher than most people expect them to finish. I like their roster, the and the starting lineup they went with against Bournemouth. I see how they could finish above the top half of the table maybe. With Fulham, I see Fulham and Nottingham Forest finishing higher than they're predicted. But you never know what could happen. They could finish lower than I think they could, but that's just my opinion.
Another interesting fixture that we saw over the weekend was West Ham played their opener at the London Stadium, losing 1-0 that 1-2 sorry 2-1 at Aston Villa in a game which we saw the debut of German player Nicholas Füllkrug. Onana scored 4 minutes in for Aston Villa, then the man you sold your car to, Lucas Paquetá, scored at 37th on a penalty, which many will say West Ham are lucky to even score in the match. But John Duran scored at the 79th minute to win the game for Aston Villa. Aston Villa, who looked to build off their top four finish last season and will play in the Champions League. What do you think about West Ham and their new signings?
West Ham, I wasn't really following their signings this season, but I do like their front line, their attacking. Kudos, Paqueta, and their striker Antonio. They're all pretty decent, but I don't see how they could be better than they were last season. They still have many more years to build. But if they don't build anytime soon, like sign a good player, someone who can help their roster out, I don't see how they can't be relegated in the next few years because I think they have the oldest roster in the Premier League, and they're just going to keep getting older and older. And I could see them being potentially relegated in the next few seasons.
Now, some of their transfers have been interesting. Um, as we said, Nicholas Füllkrug coming in from Borussia Dortmund, who just finished as runners-up in the Champions League, losing to Real Madrid in the final. He's left Borussia Dortmund and joined the West Ham. Same with Somerville from Leeds, Leeds United player, championship player of the season for Leeds. He's joined West Ham as they look to bolster with some experience in their squad. So speaking of experience, a man who's had lots of experience with betting, Ivan Toney, did not play or was featured in the squad for Brentford in their 2-1 win over Crystal Palace at the GTEC Community Stadium. As Ivan Toney has been in talk of transfer interest from several clubs across England and even across Europe. Do you think do you think they're close to a move there? Do you think they're still trying to hold out and see if somebody will swoop in for Toney?
Well, if I was Brentford, I would obviously want to keep him, but it all comes down to Ivan Toney's thoughts on what he wants to do. If he wants to go to a bigger team to develop his talent more, I would not be shocked if we see him get transferred sometime this season, maybe in January. You never know. But if Brentford do not want to get rid of him and he is fine with staying, I could see him staying for a few more years because he's definitely their key striker, key player.
Now, you'd have to think it's certainly now or never for Ivan Toney, a man who's turned 28 in March, who played for
Mhm.
England over the future for England a couple times over the summer, but a man who spent most of his career in the EFL and some of their lower divisions in League One, the Championship, and only featured twice for Newcastle United back in 2015 to 2018. A man who made his mark at Northampton Town and then found his way in the Premier League is pushing 30, but you have to wonder if it's not now, then when? If when.
Yes.
And the headline match of the weekend, it's Chelsea 0, Manchester City 2, in a game which Chelsea, led by new boss Enzo Maresca, hoped to turn the tide on what has been a turbulent couple of years for the Chelsea men, seeing their owner Roman Abramovich being forced to sell by the British government, and Todd Bowley comes in, and it seems they're just signing everyone under the sun. What do you think of Chelsea's tactical plan
Uh,
of signing players?
I really Chelsea was up there for one of the best preseasons in my opinion in signings. Obviously, bringing Pedro Neto as their big signing of the preseason from Wolves. I also like Dewsbury Hall. He was a very good signing. and Guyu from Barcelona. Those three are definitely the key. They're definitely going to end up being some of the key players for Chelsea, and can maybe help build around Cole Palmer. But Chelsea still need help in the defense. They don't have the strongest defense I've ever seen. Kukurea has been getting better, but I don't see him being their go-to guy on defense after that injury against Man City. Yeah, so I definitely like their signings, but they still need some work in that defense to help build around Cole Palmer, who is their key player and
Right,
key
that
striker.
the headlines on that match was Mateo Kovacic scoring on his return to the bridge, and what a goal that was to see. He lets a shot go from outside the box, and it just beats the goalkeeper Robert Sanchez, who many say have improved quite a bit since his shaky run of form early on last season before his injury, and eventually being replaced by, from New England, Georgi Petrovic. Um, Speaking of Pedro Neto, Dewsbury Hall, and you, all three of them made their Chelsea debuts in the Premier League, and all three of them played quite well, if you'd say. But I think they were unlucky not to get a goal there, as many will complain about the dodgy decisions from referee Anthony Taylor as that saga continues for Chelsea, dealing with Anthony Taylor. Speaking of Kieran Dewsbury Hall, his old side, Leicester City, make their return to the Premier League at 3 p.m. EST against Tottenham, as we have received the lineups for both teams. Some of the headlines include new Spurs signing Dominic Solanke, making his Tottenham debut, signing from Bournemouth, former Chelsea Academy product. As we try to get these up on the screen here, official team news from Tottenham, which sees not many changes from last season. James Maddison returning against his former club. Son still captaining the side. Vicario still in goal. Pedro Porro, Mickey Van de Ven. It's a similar Spurs side to what we saw last year. Do you have any comments about this Spurs team?
Yeah, the Spurs team is very interesting. Like the outfield looks very inconsistent. Dominic Solanke, obviously a very good signing from Bournemouth. He could definitely be one of their key players this season. But there's also Christian Romero, Benteke, Udagi, Porro all in the defense, but that could be questionable. We don't know how well they're doing. All of those players are inconsistent. But then when you look at the goalie, Vicario, you think, could he be their goalie for the whole season? Could he be the for for the whole season that he's their go-to goalie? Or will he make a better goalie signing? Because we don't know much about Vicario, how he could do against these big teams bigger than Leicester. Uh, so yeah, they could be either very good or very bad this season, but I like Leicester too. Leicester I see being the one team promoted that will not get relegated this season. They have a very Premier League roster with Ndidi, Vardy, Winks,
Yes,
Vestergaard. I like
as
him.
we see Leicester City starting lineup, Jamie Vardy making his Premier League return. As we all know, he had that miraculous season back in 2015, scoring in most of Leicester City's matches. As we see some familiar faces in this Leicester City lineup, as you said, Jamie Vardy, Ndidi, Harry Winks, some of those guys who have had Premier League experience. And then we have some unknowns in this side, seeing what they can do.
Yes.
Fatawu, the Corva Reed, of players who've been good for them in the past, but unproven in the Premier League, as we anticipate the build-up for that match coming, which can be seen live on USA Network. So we're going to wrap it up here from the studio. Thanks for tuning in. This has been the first episode of The Touchline. I'm Btn alongside ROXY. We hope you stay tuned for next week's edition, and we hope to see you soon, and keep watching the Premier League. Hopefully next week we can have more news on the EFL Championship and other divisions below the Premier League. But for now, goodbye and enjoy the match.
Yes.